you doing? I mean, it doesn't get a lot easy. It doesn't get easier, does it? Not yet.
No, it's getting worse, actually, because, straight after a funeral, and look, for me, people had said, people will drop off, but in actual fact, I'm so well supported. It just gets harder because death's abstract, and, I'm sitting here looking at a picture of Jim on the front of the book, and but he's not here. I'm in our home, I'm living our life, most things, not everything, but most things are exactly the same. And it's just strange that life does just go on. But I mean, people are dying every day all around the world, and life does go on. And it's just abstract and
Did he prepare
surreal.
you? Do you think because he's a cunning bugger.
He was cunning, all right.
Do you think he tried to prepare you and the children for what happened after his death?
Yeah, look, I know now that even being Jim's wife before he was sick, I sort of pit myself now as, I was the teacher's pet almost, because I was closest to him, I suppose, as his wife. But really, I was no different to, say, a Reach kid or a corporate that went on a camp with Jim. Like, I had the front row seat of learning from Jim. But I didn't know that really that was happening. So he was quite cunning and sophisticated, I think, in preparing me to be resilient and to overcome things. Because the girl I am now, the woman I am now, wasn't the girl that he met. I was young, naive, insecure. And he just kept chipping away, I think, and helping me grow as a person.
That interests me because it comes through in the book that he was a bit of a control freak, a bit domineering. And you had to sort that out with him even when he was sick, didn't you? Because he was really... You're two pretty strong personalities, clearly. And he was, and particularly with the medication, some of the medication he was taking, the steroids and things, he was getting very difficult to live with.
I know now too that, I fought for our relationship a lot, fought to connect with him when Jim was just, incredibly busy doing, whatever Jim was doing with the football club or with Reach or whatever else he had going on. We'd clash a lot of the time with that because Jim was like, well, how... okay, you need me now because Matisse is a baby, whatever was going on, but I've got, 500 people waiting for me to do a talk and I can't let them down, which of course you can't.
You actually threw him out of the house at one stage almost, didn't you?
Yeah.
When he was sick?
Yeah, he was having radiation for brain tumours, and you take a drug called dexamethasone, which is a steroid, and it can make patients quite aggressive. And on top of Jim's already quite, assertive, controlling personality, he was just being really horrible. So it got to the point where I was like, look, you need to go and stay at your parents for a couple of weeks, and it's not acceptable, like even on those drugs, and it was affecting the kids. Everyone was getting really upset, and he was just being, an a-hole. He was horrible. He was horrible.
How did you feel about doing that yourself, though? It must have been a guilt thing.
It's hard. It broke my heart. You could almost liken it to if you were a parent and you had your beautiful young adult or teenage child who's addicted to drugs on the other side of the door begging you for money to buy heroin. It sort of had similarities to that. It was heartbreaking. But at the same time, I knew I needed to do it for Jim to stop in his tracks and think and look and start to reflect and recount. And that's why Jim frustrated me a lot too. I thought he's so fantastic with working with young people and other adults, yet he didn't look at himself because he was just distracted. So
he did eventually, though. He
did, and I think, and that's why the book was fantastic, and the cancer sounds like a stupid thing to say, but the cancer was fantastic for Jim personally, and I think it completed a whole round circle for Jim in this lifetime that he needed to do to find peace and to have closure and to think, I've done all I need to do in this life. And the most important thing is what he did in the last 6 months, which was calm himself, look at himself, and realise at the end of the day, really love and simple things and happiness is what he was teaching everyone else, but then he took it on board himself.
And you describe in the book, and you've described to me before, in fact you both did, I think probably the last time you were in, how in those last months, how much closer you became and how it was... Just explain that. What happened?
Well, for a really easy practical example, I suppose, that people can relate to that's not too esoteric is, in the last couple of weeks of Jim's life, he was really hungry and he wasn't meant to eat because he had 2 stents in his digestive system. So, of course, if he ate solid food, he would vomit it up and it was really painful for him. But he was so hungry, so he was like, can you please make me a chicken stir fry? I'm like, oh, you're only meant to have smoothies, da-da-da. So, I start cooking, and we had this thing. He comes and puts water because you can't put oil on the chicken, and I'm like, God, he's facing death and he's worrying about eating oil. So at that time normally I would have gone off my tree, and then the tap flew off the kitchen sink, and there's water everywhere, and then instead of my normal sort of like it was just let him put water in the chicken stir fry, and everything just calmed, and nothing that normally you can get caught up in everyday life mattered anymore, and we would laugh about it in the end.
You talk about it then? I'm surprised you hadn't. You said you didn't talk much in the way you did in here that day. Did you talk about that then in the last weeks?
Yeah, look, we did. We talked about our relationship mostly, and I think love. By then, I had to reconcile all those sorts of things within myself, and I didn't necessarily burden Jim with those things because he was quite unwell by then. He'd had 6 rounds of brain surgery, so his ability to think through concepts was limited. So, I sort of thought we won't waste time on the chicken stir-fry discussion. But
what was in your mind, Sam, when you came out of the funeral and waved to the crowd? That was one of the most touching moments I think I've ever seen. I've been to a few state funerals over the years. Was that an instinctive reaction? What did you think?
Oh, definitely instinctive. I mean, I walked out. I honestly didn't expect to see all those beautiful people at Federation Square, and I was really overwhelmed because I thought I found comfort within myself that while Jim and I, fought for agency and space about, what he should be doing, I looked at all those people and thought, well, that's what Jim's been doing, and thank God for that. I just felt so touched, and that everyone was there to show their respects to Jim and, all the family and everything. It was the most beautiful moment. Instinctive. I actually wanted to walk over, but lovely Joe from the State Protocol Department said that we don't have things in place and it could cause a big ruckus, and so my instinct was to walk over to everyone, and I know that's what Jim would have done, so I thought at the very least I can blow a kiss and do a wave before I left.
Have you had time to yourself? It's been a very public illness, a very public death, very public grieving. What about you? Have you managed to get away and get into your own head?
Yeah, I'm human too. Really recently, I've just got back from Byron Bay. I had to spend a month there and gather my thoughts, and I took the kids, left my phone in Melbourne, and just regroup and think about what I wanted for the children and I moving forward. And I don't want to. I'll always love Jim and have his memory, and Jim's always part of us. However, there's practical realities of Jim's life that can't be mine forever. So I had to make some pretty tough decisions, which I've made with what's right for the kids and I, but it was very important time for me.
There are a couple of things that stood out in the book in a very poignant way. One is talking to the children about it. Another was packing up his clothes. He packed up his own clothes. He didn't want you to have to do it. Is that right?
No, yeah. We were down at Rye, our beach place, and yeah, that was before the last surgery, so we were expecting Jim to sort of die any time in the next sort of couple of weeks. So he decided to pack up his clothes because he didn't want, he'd heard that it's quite traumatic for people to do that for their loved ones. So he started doing it. But then, of course, I started saying, you can't throw that jacket away, and asking his friends, do you want this jacket? And people were like going, God, no, Sam. I'm like, God, he's never worn it, And then when we got the extra time, he hung it all back up, was hysterical. Before the surgery, just methodically went back, didn't say anything.
Hello, Sandra. Yes, Sandra?
Oh, hi, Neil and Sam. I have cancer, terminal cancer. And I just wanted to say what an inspiration Sam and Jim are. And I can identify with everything Sam has said today.
You got support, Sandra?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, I have a lot of support and a wonderful family. And I can't wait to follow Jim's story from the very beginning. And I can't wait to read his book. So I'll send my husband out today to get it.
Okay. You just hold on. We'll just have a chat to you off air, see if there's anything we can do to help. That's the power of what you and Jim have done here,
Yeah, well, yeah, that's hard. That's tough. It's good Sandra's well supported. It's not easy. Cancer's a hideous illness. So
it is.
Yeah.
another thing that stood out to me in fact, Jim's last meal, you went to a restaurant down and said, how can he get off his deathbed and go to a restaurant?
You know, that was incredible. By that point, Jim couldn't speak anymore. He was just sort of pointing his finger. He's pointing at his jeans. And I'm saying, Jim, I just don't think this is a good idea. So, you know, he demanded, again, demanding, you will get me dressed. And I said, fine, but I will have to put you in the wheelchair, because we'd had the wheelchair for a couple of weeks, but he refused to sit in it. And, you know, he'd struggle up and down our stairs. We've got a sort of 2-story house with, you know, I'd have to get people to help him. So we got him down the stairs in the wheelchair. And then I'm like, the restaurant's this way, and he's pointing the other way. So, you know, I'm like, we went round, and he just wanted to have, I think, a last walk through the streets. And it was a beautiful sunny afternoon, the breeze and the leaves on the trees. And then he pointed to the restaurant, and he just proceeded to sit there and eat a 2-course meal. And he was getting stuck into the Jameson and Cokes, and he had crepes for dessert, his favourite. And I was, you know, micromanaging him and worrying about him. And because he couldn't speak, he made, this is politically incorrect, but, you know, he made that sort of gesture like he had a disability, like, you know, like did this to me, like, you know, stop it. Like, don't stop treating me like that. Like, even though physically I can't communicate with you, I'm still Jim and I'm still here. So, you know, it sort of said to me, treat me with respect. Stop micromanaging. Let me have that drink. Let me eat this. And then we went home that night and he got into bed. I'll never forget that look. He sort of threw himself back against the pillows in the bed and did this like a horse that's finished a race. Just sort of did this. Back he went. And that was it. You know, 4:30 that morning he woke up. He didn't really wake up, but he was vomiting. And then that night was the last night he was conscious and could communicate.
A good memory?
Beautiful memory, really beautiful. You know, the trauma for me is in, at that point, making that decision with our fantastic palliative care team to put the pumps on and manage Jim out gently. And
put the pumps on means he stays unconscious.
Sorry, it's, you know, I didn't want to, but you sort of have to, because the doctors explained that if I didn't, Jim would be subject to more pain and vomiting, seizures, and it could be quite a horrible death where you need an ambulance and it's an emergency type situation. So we were definitely there. But even on that Saturday night, after that Friday night, Jim was moving his feet and I was told not to give him any water, and he pointed to his mouth. So Matisse ran up to Fitzroy Street with Jules Lund. I was sent her up there on her own at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. Don't think that was smart. And Jules said she can't go up there. You know, but he ate half of that icy pole. And it was just, I don't know how anyone gets through that. I think I need to do a bit of grief counselling, actually, about that last 3 days.
Have you had grief counselling yourself?
No, but I will. I'm going to meet with our oncologist and our palliative care doctor just to be talked through those last 3 days, because that's when I lost it. After that, in Jim's heart, which this is very beautiful, because in the end his heart was pounding, and clearly, you know, he'd played so many consecutive football matches and his long distance running. So, you know, his brain's dying, his body's dying, and I woke up on the Monday morning before he died, early in hours of Tuesday, and the whole bed was literally shaking like I was on a ride from his heart, because it was working overtime to compensate for the rest of his body dying. And he was like Phar Lap. His bloody heart wouldn't stop, you know. And he's got that big rib cage, and it reminded me of his football days where all you could see was that big rib cage with that big heart. But to me, it was testament to what a beautiful heart he had, that it just kept, you know, beating physically, but it represented that man that he was, this big, beautiful heart.